The 1990s were a golden decade for Japanese animation, a time of bold experiments, haunting visions, and stories too daring for their moment. Some films soared into the mainstream, while others were silenced, cut apart, or hidden from sight. These are the forgotten reels, the dangerous dreams. 13 Japanese animated movies from the 1990s that were banned but never truly erased. First, Pokémon, the uncut story of Mewtwo's origin, 1999. A shadowed laboratory, a fragile heartbeat, a creature born from science, destined for loneliness. This was the uncut origin of Mewtwo, the Pokémon most audiences never truly saw. Unlike the cheerful battles that define the franchise, this 10-minute short dared to ask questions about life, creation, and grief. Here, we glimpse Mewtwo not as a weapon, but as a child. In dreamlike visions, he meets fleeting companions, including the fragile clone of a young girl. Together, they speak in whispers of friendship and hope, until, one by one, those companions fade into nothingness. What remains is emptiness. A creature awakening alone, betrayed by science, and consumed by loss. Released only in Japan before Pokémon, the first movie, the short was deemed too dark, too painful for international audiences. Distributors quietly cut it away, leaving fans with a brighter, safer tale. For years, the footage lived only in whispers, surfacing on rare VHS copies and grainy fan recordings passed hand to hand. Today, it remains one of the most powerful fragments of the franchise. A reminder that even the most commercial worlds carry shadows, that behind every battle and bright adventure, there lies a hidden story of sorrow. For those who discover it, Mewtwo's origin is no longer about power. It is about heartbreak. 2. Urotsuki Doji, Inferno Road, 1993. The screen opens to fire, demons locked in endless battle, and humanity caught between chaos and desire. This was Urotsuki Doji, Inferno Road, a continuation of the infamous saga that pushed Japanese animation into realms most viewers had never imagined. Part dark fantasy, part nightmare opera. It combined mythological creatures with graphic violence, creating a spectacle both mesmerizing and terrifying. To some, it was art unchained. To others, it was blasphemy. In Japan, it developed a cult following, whispered about in rental shops, celebrated for its lavish animation and world building. But overseas, the reception was harsher. In the United Kingdom, in Australia, in several European nations, censors intervened. Entire sequences were excised, stories mutilated, until only fragments remained. For collectors, the uncut tapes became forbidden treasures, traded in secret, a badge of defiance against the scissors of censorship. And yet, beneath the notoriety lies something greater. A portrait of an era when anime refused to play by safe rules. When creators dared to drag audiences through Inferno, not for comfort, but for confrontation. Inferno Road endures, not because it pleased its viewers, but because it frightened them. Proof that sometimes the most dangerous art is the art that will not compromise. 3. Perfect Blue, 1997. A young woman stands on stage, bathed in blue light. Applause thunders. Yet behind her eyes lingers doubt. This is Perfect Blue, a psychological spiral that blurred fame, fantasy, and fear in ways that unsettled not just audiences, but entire nations. Directed by Satoshi Kon, the film follows Mima, a rising pop idol who abandons singing to pursue acting. What begins as ambition soon unravels into paranoia, stalkers, illusions, fractured identities. Each frame becomes a puzzle, each reflection a question. Who is Mima? And who is watching her? Upon release, Perfect Blue was hailed by critics as a masterpiece of psychological horror, a mirror held up to celebrity culture. Yet its disturbing depictions of voyeurism, violence, and mental breakdown sparked unease. In some countries, screenings were limited. In others, distributors demanded edits. Too intense, they said. Too real. For years, its reputation grew underground. Filmmakers like Darren Aronofsky would later borrow imagery from it, citing its raw power. But its true legacy lies in how it transformed anime's possibilities. no longer just fantasy or adventure. It was cinema that stared straight into the abyss of identity. Today, Perfect Blue is not remembered for its bands. It is remembered for its bravery. 4. Midori, Shoujo Tsubaki, 1992. A carnival tent. Painted smiles. A child too young to carry such sorrow. This was Midori, Shoujo Tsubaki, an adaptation of an underground 1960s manga that became one of the most controversial anime films ever made. The story follows Midori, an orphan who joins a traveling circus. But instead of wonder, she finds cruelty, exploitation, a world where innocence is devoured. The animation shifts between dreamlike beauty and grotesque horror, leaving audiences caught between fascination and despair. Released in 1992, the film shocked Japan. Official prints were destroyed, screenings canceled, and for years it existed only in fragments. Collectors passed it around in whispers, fueling its reputation as a forbidden work. To some, it was too much to endure. To others, it was a raw masterpiece, unflinching in its portrait of suffering. What makes Midori endure is not shock alone, but the way it elevates pain into art. A surreal fairy tale, twisted and haunting, that forces us to confront what society prefers to hide. Love it or loathe it, Midori refuses erasure. It stands as proof that animation is not just for escape. It can wound, it can scar, and sometimes it must. 5. Pokémon, Electric Soldier, Porygon, 1997. A flicker of light, red, blue, pulsing faster and faster across the screen. Children sat wide-eyed before their televisions on December 16th, 1997, watching Pokémon. And then suddenly, reality intruded. This was Electric Soldier Porygon, a simple episode in which Ash and his friends ventured into cyberspace. But one animation effect, rapid flashes of color, became infamous. Within minutes, children across Japan felt dizzy, nauseous. Some collapsed. More than 600 were hospitalized with seizures. The crisis was national. News reports broke through the country. Parents panicked. Officials intervened. And the episode was banned, pulled from rotation, never to air again. Though Pikachu unleashed the fateful thunderbolt, it was the digital Pokémon, Porygon, who bore the blame. Exiled from the franchise for years, unfairly branded a danger. But beyond the scandal, this episode transformed television itself. Safety guidelines for flashing lights were rewritten worldwide. Animators reconsidered how fantasy might affect the body. In its absence, Electric Soldier Porygon became a ghost story of the Pokémon era. Not remembered for its adventure, but for the night animation literally jumped from the screen into the fragile world of its viewers. 6. Kite, 1998. A city at night. Neon signs hum. A girl walks among strangers, her expression unreadable. By day she is invisible, by night she is a weapon. This is Kite, one of the most infamous anime films of the late 1990s. It follows Sawa, an orphan taken in by two detectives who promise to protect her. Instead, they manipulate her, mold her, force her into a life she never chose. By the time she becomes an assassin, innocence has been stolen, replaced with cold precision. The violence is stylish, operatic, laced with tragedy. Yet beneath every action sequence beats a question. How does one survive when even protectors betray? Upon release, Kite was praised for its gritty artistry, its blend of crime drama and tragedy. But certain scenes crossed cultural and legal lines. In Norway, it was banned outright. Elsewhere, entire minutes were cut away, sanitized for audiences who would never know its full impact. Yet, Kite refuses to fade. Its legacy endures in its haunting visuals, its restless moral questions. It is not just about action or revenge. It is about survival in a world where trust itself becomes a weapon. And that is why, decades later, it still lingers like a neon afterimage. 7. Neon Genesis. Evangelion, Death and Rebirth, The End of Evangelion, 1997. A blood-red sky. Towering machines locked in apocalyptic embrace. Children burdened with the weight of the world. This was Evangelion, and in 1997, its cinematic chapters brought both awe and alarm. Death and Rebirth and the end of Evangelion pushed the series' haunting themes to their breaking point. Religious imagery bled across the screen, crosses, angels, and apocalyptic visions that unsettled censors and viewers alike. The story dared to strip away illusions, confronting audiences with despair, isolation, and questions of existence that lingered long after the credits. In Japan, the films were polarizing. Fans praised their brilliance while others walked out. Bewildered, overseas, some television broadcasters refused to show them. In parts of Asia and the Middle East, the religious symbolism sparked censorship and bans. Too disturbing, they said, too sacrilegious. And yet, few works in animation have carried such weight. The films became cultural milestones, studied, dissected, worshipped. They changed what anime could be, no longer entertainment alone, but a vessel for existential dread, for philosophy, for faith and its collapse. Evangelion is not simply watched, it is endured, and for those who endure it, it is unforgettable. 8. Ninja Scroll, 1993. A lone warrior walks through a rain-soaked forest. Shadows move, a blade flashes, blood falls like rain. This was Ninja Scroll, released in 1993, and instantly hailed as one of the most exhilarating animated films of its time. It told the story of Jubei, a wandering swordsman drawn into a world of betrayal, sorcery, and impossible duels. Each battle was a spectacle, hand-drawn artistry at its peak, every movement fluid, every strike unforgettable. For fans of martial arts cinema, it was revelation, a fusion of historical fantasy and adult storytelling that showed anime could rival live-action epics. Yet within its beauty lay moments of violence too raw for censors. In the UK, 52 seconds were excised. Elsewhere, scenes were trimmed or softened. Despite this, or perhaps because of it, Ninja Scroll spread like wildfire. Audiences celebrated its style, whispered about its forbidden edges. Today, its legacy is immense. It inspired countless creators, influenced Western animation and cinema, and remains a touchstone for what anime can achieve. Ninja Scroll is remembered not just for what it showed, but for the courage to show it. Proof that beauty and brutality can share the same frame. 9. Violence. Jack, 1996. Dust rises over a shattered city. A giant figure strides through ruins, his fists heavy with judgment. This was Violence Jack, a brutal vision of post-apocalyptic survival that divided audiences from its very first frames. Based on Go Nagai's legendary manga, the 1996 OVA thrust viewers into a wasteland born from an earthquake. Here, gangs ruled, cruelty thrived, and morality was stripped away. Jack himself was no savior. He was a force of nature, a man who answered brutality with greater brutality, punishing evil in ways that unsettled even hardened viewers. Censors noticed. In the UK, over 6 minutes were carved away from Hell's Wind. In Australia, the Evil Town installment was banned outright. Even in Japan, its unflinching violence drew controversy. But for fans, the censorship only added to its mystique. The forbidden tapes became cult relics, passed hand to hand. What makes Violence Jack endure is its audacity. It is not escapism, it is confrontation. It forces us to ask, what remains of humanity when law and kindness are gone? In its answer, brutal, unrelenting, and unforgettable, lies the reason Violence Jack. It remains one of the most notorious anime of the 1990s. 10. Patlabor. 2. The Movie, 1993. Snow falls quietly over Tokyo Bay. The city is still, but beneath the calm, tension coils. This was Patlabor 2. The Movie, released in 1993, and unlike the violent spectacles of its era, it wielded silence as its sharpest weapon. The story unfolds in a near-future Japan, where giant police mechs patrol the streets. Yet the machines are not the true focus. The threat comes from within. Whispers of a coup, shadows in the military, questions about loyalty and state power. In a country where the self-defense forces were tightly bound by post-war law, the film's premise struck a nerve. Could the Guardians of Peace turn against their own? Could the government itself fracture from within? Unlike action-driven anime, Patlabor 2 took its time. Long, lingering shots of bridges and snowy cityscapes. Conversations heavy with implication. Its beauty was quiet, but its message loud. Critics praised its intelligence, calling it one of anime's rare political thrillers. Yet, broadcasters treated it with caution. Too close to reality. Too dangerous to air widely. While never officially banned, it was quietly sidelined, rarely promoted, and seldom shown on television. Today, its reputation has only grown. Fans and scholars revisit it as a rare masterpiece that dared to ask unsettling questions. Patlabor 2 reminds us that censorship is not always about graphic images. Sometimes it is about words unspoken, about ideas deemed too fragile to expose. It endures as one of the boldest anime films of the 1990s, proof that silence, too, can be subversive. 11th Pokémon. The Lost Episodes, late 1990s. Children gathered around televisions, trading cards clutched in their hands, humming that unforgettable theme song. Pokémon was everywhere in the late 1990s, and yet, not every story made it to the world stage. Some episodes were quietly erased, edited, or banned, forgotten chapters of a global phenomenon. In Turkey, the cheerful Sing Purin episode was banned outright. In South Korea, cultural sensitivities led to the removal of scenes involving traditional samurai outfits. Across the globe, episodes featuring the Pokémon Jinx were pulled after controversies over its design. Elsewhere, episodes vanished when they too closely mirrored real-world disasters. Earthquakes, storms, even violent attacks. Sometimes the content was too light-hearted for dark times. Sometimes it was simply misunderstood. What makes these lost episodes fascinating is their ordinariness. They were not violent epics. They were playful adventures, as innocent as the cards children shuffled on playgrounds. Yet, cultural context reshaped them into something dangerous. Removed not because of what they were, but because of what the world saw in them. For fans, these episodes became legends. Have you seen the one that never aired? Do you know the story of the missing Jinx episodes? In whispers and fan forums, the erased chapters grew larger than life. And even today, they remain treasures hidden in the vaults of history. Pokémon was a worldwide success, but even global giants are not immune to the scissors of censorship. These lost episodes remind us, what is erased is often what we most long to find again. 12. Ghost in the Shell, 1995. Rain slicks neon streets. A woman's silhouette dissolves into digital code. In 1995, Ghost in the Shell shattered boundaries, bringing cyberpunk philosophy to animation, with a vision as haunting as it was prophetic. The film followed Major Motoko Kusanagi, a cyborg torn between human consciousness and machine existence. It was a story of identity, of freedom, of the soul's survival in an age of technology. With its painterly animation, quiet pauses, and unforgettable score, it became one of the most celebrated anime films of all time. But its reception was not universal. In parts of Asia and the Middle East, distributors bristled at its nudity and religious undertones. Certain scenes were cut, altered, or suppressed entirely. For a film so steeped in questions of humanity, its body became the battleground, censored for exposing too much, silenced for asking too many questions. Yet its influence only grew. Filmmakers from Hollywood to Europe drew inspiration from its aesthetic, its philosophy, its daring. The Wachowskis would openly cite it as a seed for The Matrix. Western audiences embraced it as proof that animation could be cinema, not just entertainment. Today, Ghost in the Shell stands as one of anime's crowning achievements. Its censorship now feels almost ironic, an attempt to contain a story that was, by its very nature, about breaking free from control. It is more than a film. It is a vision of the future, still echoing in ours. 13th Pokémon. Episodes pulled after tragedies, 90s to 2000s, bright skies, cheerful music, a story about friendship and adventure, and then suddenly, real life intervened. This was the fate of several Pokémon episodes that were pulled, delayed, or banned in the wake of disasters and attacks. When earthquakes shook Japan, episodes featuring collapsing buildings or destroyed towns were quietly removed from schedules. After typhoons, scenes of storm damage were deemed too painful for viewers still recovering. Even after the September 11th attacks in the United States, certain episodes were withheld, their imagery too close to fresh scars. These bans were not about violence or fear of influence. They were about empathy, about shielding audiences from stories that struck too close to reality. Yet the result was the same: gaps in the narrative, lost adventures that fans never saw. For some, these missing chapters became footnotes. For others, they were myth, stories whispered about in online communities, the episodes you were never meant to watch. And in that absence, their meaning deepened. They became reminders that even the brightest, most innocent shows exist in dialogue with the world around them. Today, the missing Pokémon episodes remind us how fragile the boundary between fantasy and reality can be. Sometimes, a story is not banned because it is dangerous. It is banned because the world itself is too wounded to receive it. And in those silences, the legacy of censorship becomes just as powerful as the stories we remember. The 1990s gave us anime too daring to last, films and episodes caught between vision and censorship. Yet their absence only made them stronger. Each ban became legend, each cut a scar. Cinema endures not by playing safe, but by daring. Subscribe, like, and rediscover the forbidden.